Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, so I was talking about simile and metaphor and how um, writers basically like to use similes and metaphor. So a simile says this is that. So example of a simile would be as fragile as a spider's web and big giant. So even in text, these tools make the content more relatable and memorable. So if a passage describes global warming, for instance, as a creeping tide of change, your job is as a summary reader, is to recognize that metaphor and understand the emotional or perhaps persuasive weight that it carries. Now, descriptive language often signals the writer's attitude or helps build tone, right? And you need to pay attention to it. And you also want to answer the writer's tone or the proposed questions. Okay, and then we have narrative, we have something called narrative structure, which basically it means that every text will tell a particular story. Um, um, so um, there are four key elements of literary works, right? Four key elements of literary works, and we have something called characterization, and that basically talks about how characters are developed through actions, dialogue, and description. So, what types of characters exist? You know, we have the protagonist, we have the antagonist, we have um, the dynamic characters, and we have the protagonist basically is the main character. For example, the person called Scout, the girl called Scout in the Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, and then the antagonist is the opposing force, and that's like you in that same book. Then we have the dynamic characters, those who change over time. So like Ebenezer Scrooge in Christmas Carol, and we have the static characters who remain the same across all what's it called time and seasons, as it were. We have an example of that to be Sherlock Holmes. Okay, Sherlock Holmes. And we also have setting as one of the core elements, and that's the time and the space in which a story unfolds. Okay, so you need to consider the historical context, the physical context, and the social environment as it were. We have the plot, the sequence of events that make up the story, the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution at the end of the day. And we have the theme. The theme. The theme is the central message or the idea of the literary work. Okay? The central message or the idea of a literary work. So common themes in literature will be justice and morality, like in the example of To Kill a Mockingbird, power and corruption, like in Animal Farm, love and sacrifice, like in Romeo and Juliet, and overcoming adversity, like in the Diary of Anne Frank. And it would be nice if you've ever read these books before, or rather, let me advise you to read them whenever you're able to, because these books have, they're basically the timeless, and they give you insights into the things that we're talking about here today. Okay.
Sorry, ma'am.
So,
Hello, ma'am. We can't hear you really clearly. Your voice is not audible enough, ma'am.
oh, my voice is not audible enough. Can you hear me now? Am I more audible now?
Okay,
I'd like
it's
to
a
get
bit
response,
better now,
please. Am
ma'am.
I more audible now? It's better. Okay. All right. That means I have to kind of like um speak much louder than I already was. Yeah. So let's talk about identifying narrative structure in IELTS text. Okay. Now, every text tells a story, and here's something that most test takers don't notice. IELTS passages often follow a kind of story structure, even when they're not telling stories in the traditional sense. Now, think about it. There's usually a main character or subject, an invention, a cultural phenomenon, or perhaps even a scientific breakthrough, right? And then there's often a question that needs solving, right? And then we have a passage that may trace a journey of development and discovery. And then there's some form of conclusion or resolution. That is what we've learned, what's changed, and what still needs to be done. Okay, so these are things that we can see in those narrative those narrative structures, as it were.
We're so sorry about that. I think our network glitched. Please, she will be back shortly. Hello, Madam Odejide, can you hear me, ma'am? Please, let's give a few minutes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, but it's not that audible, ma'am.
I don't know what's going on, because I believe that I was quite audible before, and then all of a sudden it just went off. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am. You're really audible when it started, but it's a bit faint now.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't know what to do to rectify that. But can you hear me? I'm literally shouting. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. It's clear now.
Okay. So I think I'll just repeat the last thing I said, because I don't know where I went off. But do bear with me. So I was talking about um identifying narrative structures in IELTS texts. And I was saying that most test takers do not notice that IELTS passages follow a kind of story structure, even when they're not particularly telling stories in the traditional sense of the word. And I was saying that usually you would find in an IELTS passage, you would find a main character or subject. You would also find a problem that needs solving, and then the passage will also, or most of the time, trace a journey of discovery and of development. And then we also have a conclusion or resolution that basically translates into what we've learned and what needs to, what has changed and what still needs to be done. Okay, and this is exactly how narratives work.
Sorry,
So,
ma'am. We can't see your screen, ma'am.
oh, you can't see my screen. Oh dear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, pardon me. Hmm, going on. I'm trying to rectify this. Just give me a minute. Okay. Nice. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, ma'am, we can, ma'am.
Lovely. Thank you. Do I have any questions in the chat room before we continue to anybody said anything? Okay. Yes, you will get the slides. Absolutely. Right. Okay, so that's even been answered already. Okay, so let me continue. So as I was saying, this is how narratives work. So the um help and recognizing the pattern helps you make sense of the passage after. Because if you know that there's a passage and there's a pattern that that is usually followed, it helps you, like there's some kind of preemptive knowledge that it gives you. For example, if you have a passage on the evolution of transportation, that kind of passage might start with early inventions and then introduce problems with modern travel, discuss innovations like electric cars, and end up with predictions for the future. Now that's a journey, that's narrative. If you get what I'm trying to say, it's a journey, it's narrative. So you can kind of predict where the text is going next if you use this structure to map out the passage mentally. It helps you to follow the flow. Okay. All right. Then we have something called and I do believe we've talked quite a bit about this point. Okay, let's talk about To Kill a Mockingbird as a passage. We've said a few things about it, but okay, before we go to that, let me talk about um the tone and the mood as it concerns the literary elements. Okay, so even though I know that I've mentioned a little bit of this before, let me delve further into it. Now, there's something called reading between the lines. Okay, reading between the lines. And basically, that's when you're just talking about the tone. You can imagine, okay, let me give you an example. Like somebody sends you a message, a text message, and you can literally tell how that person is feeling from the way the message comes in. That's what tone is about. Do you understand? So, literary term that refers to a writer's attitude or emotional emotion in a text is what we refer to as tone. And even in academic or factual writing, tone also sneaks in. So you often hear like a voice behind the facts. So, you want to ask yourself questions like, is the writer enthusiastic about the subject, or are they critical of a certain theory, or do they sound neutral, or is there a hint of irony, urgency, or even sarcasm, there somewhere? So IELTS loves to test your ability to detect tone. Why? Because understanding tone shows that you're not just reading the words, but you're actually interpreting meaning. Okay, so the next time a passage about urban planning, for instance, seems a little too um, excited or a bit too gloomy, you might want to pay attention, okay? Because that emotional energy could be the key to answering a tricky question about the writer's opinion or stance. So typically, I would say look for emotionally charged words, okay, like contrastive phrases and rhetorical devices, because they're your clues to detect the tone and the mood. Okay, and then we also have persuasive devices. Why do I feel like mention persuasive devices? Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I need to check a few things down the line so that I know that's where. Oh, all right, right, we're good. Yeah, where was I? Okay, so the persuasive devices, these are like the writer's secret tools, okay? Now, many IELTS texts, especially those adapted from opinion articles, like essays or speeches, they use persuasive techniques to subtly, or maybe not so subtly, influence how you think. Now, here are some common ones. We have the rhetorical questions, like, can we really ignore the evidence? That's an example. These ask you to think critically without expecting a direct answer. Okay, then we have emotive language. Now, emotive language, if you use a phrase like devastating effects or a miraculous breakthrough or heartbreaking consequences, these words, they stir your emotions. And so words like these are what we call emotive language. And then we have what we call hyperbole and exaggeration. So we hear someone or you read someone say, write something like the greatest innovation of our time. Really? Says who now? Do you understand? It's persuasive. They're exaggerating, they're using a hyperbole. Do you understand? And then there's something called bias or loaded language. Now, sometimes a writer's bias shows up in their words, the choices of the words that they use or in the sources they reference. Okay, so spotting techniques like these not only help you understand the text better, but it gives you a clear advantage when answering questions about the writer's purpose, their attitude, or even um argument, as it were. So you need to ask yourself every now and again when you find yourself reading these kinds of passages, that is this fact or is this opinion? And if it feels persuasive, it probably is opinion. Okay. So the big takeaway here, what I've just said, is that you need to the tools that you learn from literary analysis, like the imagery, the structure, the tone, and persuasion, they're not just for your novels and for your poems. They have superpowers that you eventually need to have so that you can master your English language testing, um passages, so to speak, your reading tests and things like that. So it can be IELTS, it can be language search, it can be TOEFL, it can be a lot of different things. So think of it this way, like literary analysis trains your eyes to see beneath the words, okay? To notice the craft, to notice the subtle clues hidden behind the meanings, okay? So yeah, basically that's it. So these skills, they help you break down dense texts. They help you um, they help you make sense of complex arguments. They help you recognize patterns in unfamiliar topics, and then they help you read faster and smarter, because you really do need to have those skills, especially when you're doing an English language test. Okay, so don't be afraid of those things, those literally and analysis. You need to embrace them and yeah, basically that's what you need. But the key thing here is that um appreciating literary work and being able to understand literary components and literary analysis and things like that are very important when you're doing IELTS, because you end up now knowing what to look for. Okay, you're not just a reader, you're a decoder, a meaning a meaning hunter, so to speak. So a literary detective in the world of reading and all whatnot, as it were. So yeah, I'm not sure if I want us to break down this novel, so to speak. And how many people have read To Kill a Mockingbird? Please answer me. How many people have read To Kill a Mockingbird? How many people have read To Kill a Mockingbird? How many people have read To Kill a Mockingbird? Anybody? Nobody? Okay, nobody. Because I would have said, let's let's look at the book together. But well, okay, somebody's answering. Um, no, not by Maya Angelou. No, not by. Never read it before. No, no, no. It wasn't written by Maya Angelou. Um. Anyway, irrespective, if you have read it, if you had read it, you'd know. So obviously you haven't read it before. So let's not go into it so much, and let's look for, because basically the reason why I wanted, okay, let's talk about it a little bit, because the reason why I wanted to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird is because sometimes the excerpts of it come out in language tests. So that's why. So I wanted to um I wanted us to identify some of the characters, setting the plot and all of that in To Kill a Mockingbird. So when you talk about the main character, you want to know who the passage is about. You want to know where and when the event is taking place in the setting, and I've said that before. The plot element, the themes, discussion, questions, and things like that. Now, why this novel specifically? It's because it explores the characterization, the setting, the plot, the theme, and contains themes relevant to IELTS passages, such as the the justice, the morality, and the social issues. So when we break down To Kill a Mockingbird, and we're talking about the characterization, we have Atticus Finch, who is a moral lawyer fighting against the racial injustice. And then we have Scout Finch, a young girl learning about prejudice and morality. Please give me 5 seconds. I need to quickly shut the door. And I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Yes, as I was saying, I think somebody asked a question. Okay, Richard, you were asking if it was written by Maya Angelou. No, it was written by Harper Lee, someone called Harper Lee. Harper Lee. It's a quite insightful read. I think I read it when I was in secondary school. I haven't read it again since then, but I kind of like remember basically what it was about and what I took away from it. So yeah, it's set in Macomb, Alabama in the 1930s. You know, a town that was deeply affected by the racial inequality, and you can imagine um, um, Jim Crow, Alabama. Okay, so it was around the. Oh, sorry, it had that feel anyway. And the plot was the trial of Tim Robinson, a black man falsely accused of a crime. Now, the other part of the plot also is Scout's, um, that Scout Finch, her coming of age journey as she witnesses injustice. So the themes of this book here is the racial and social injustice, the loss of innocence, and moral integrity and courage. Okay. So again, reason why this book is it was something that I chose is because of its connection to the kind of passages that you find in IELTS reading passages. So IELTS passages likes to hammer on historical and historical struggles and often follows similar themes of justice and resilience, right? Um, uh, yeah, where was that? Okay. And then the descriptive language usually also is something that is very prevalent when it comes to IELTS reading, reading passages. I've talked about reading between the lines. We talked about the tone with regards to reading between the lines, and then key strategies for critical reading. Um, so you're looking for implied meaning when you're reading. So what is the author suggesting without particularly, stating it? You want to consider the author's choice of words. Does the language carry some kind of emotional weight? And you want to analyze the sentence structure, like are there contrasts, are there repetitions, are there omissions? And then you also want to identify the assumptions and the biases. What perspective is the author writing from? We spoke about all of that prior to now. Okay. I'm going to read aloud a short IELTS style passage, and it has a narrative style, meaning that it tells a small story while sharing information, and it's short and sweet, but don't let that fool you. There's depth and simplicity in there. And so as I read, I want you to become active listeners, lean in, focus not just on what the author is saying or what I'm reading out loud, but on how they say it and why. Okay? Now, as you listen, I want you to pay attention to three main elements: the tone, the style, and the message. The tone, the style, and the message. So the tone, what mood or attitude is coming through? Is the writer hopeful? Is the writer nostalgic? Is the writer skeptical? Or maybe they're just being subtly humorous, okay? Then also, what kind of language is used? Is it formal or controversial? Conversational? Or are they vivid descriptions or plain factual statements? And then thirdly, the message. What is the deeper point? Okay. What is the passage really, about beneath the surface? Okay. So yeah, this is the passage. I'm just going to read it out loud and then we'll take it from there. So it's titled The Light in the Shed. The Light in the Shed. When the electricity went out that evening, Ife didn't panic. She lit a candle, then another, carefully placing them around the small wooden shed she now called home. Outside, the wind whispered through the banana trees, and the village was wrapped in darkness. But inside, the flickering glow cast a gentle warmth over her textbooks and worn-out notepad. For Ife, this was normal. Studying by candlelight was a nightly ritual, not a tragedy. She had learned to find beauty in simplicity and strength in routine. While some teenagers her age complained about slow Wi-Fi, Ife calculated angles by hand and translated paragraphs by torchlight. One day she whispered, I'll be the one designing solar grids for villages like this. She smiled, not because she had all the tools she needed, but because she had a vision that outshone the darkness. Okay? So now remember the question that I asked, what I asked you to look out for. And then I'm going to ask you to answer these questions. And I'm going to give you 10 minutes to read and then answer the questions. So 10 minutes, I read it out loud. You may want to read it again and then answer the questions in the chat room after 10 minutes. And let's see how we go from there. Let's see what your opinion is, or how your opinions are, and how you answer those questions. Okay. And there are no wrong answers. Okay, because it's really about what you see, what you hear. Okay. All right. So let me bring it up again, read it, and then after 5 minutes, I'll give you the questions again.
Please let's hold on while she joins us back in a few minutes. Why that is good? While you were waiting for the link to join the Telegram group is on the chat box because that's where the materials for this course will be posted for this class, the materials and Telegram. So please group and have access to all of that. Thank you. Please, when you're done with your exercise, please indicate in the chat box. Thank you.
I reckon we've gone 10 minutes already. I'm not seeing any responses apart from just one from Joy in the chat room. So can I get your responses in the chat room, please, so that we can proceed and finish the class? Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for that answer. Rick, you said no sound. The idea was for you to read the passage and then to respond with answers to this question. So we probably were not here when I asked everyone to do that. So Richard said the main thing is first struggle and challenges she faces in the night reading, even though underprivileged, she still tries to make lemonade out of lemons life throws at her. Okay. Um, the passage is about hope at its core. Endurance is the emotion and the idea that ties it up all together. The tone is the writer's voice is that of vision, passion, ambition to make it big for a community. It is hopeful. It makes me feel no mountain is insurmountable in life. No problem is difficult. No problem or difficulty is permanent. If there is life, there is hope. The passage reminds me of the book, The Joys of Motherhood and Things Fall Apart. Beautiful. Nathaniel Adams says the main theme of the passage is resilience and hope in the face of hardship. It highlights how determination, vision, and inner strength can thrive even in challenging conditions. Okay, Jay Rashid said the writer is trying to tell us who Ife is. It's hopeful, serious, and encouragement to be resolute and believe in our vision. And then three, there's metaphor. And then the central idea is that Ife, despite lacking modern conveniences like electricity, internet, finds strength in her routine and maintains a powerful vision for the future. Beautiful. Okay, I'm loving this. Thank you very much for all your responses. This is absolutely delightful. Okay, and then of course Nathaniel also says again that the passage is tied together by a blend of resilience, hope, determination, and quiet pride. The tone of the writer's voice is in the passage is calm, reflective, and inspiring. Lovely, lovely. Thank you very much for that. I absolutely um, I love what you just gave right there. Okay, so why did it matter that we did this? Okay, because I mean, just by doing this, we're not just reading to garner um information, but we're also reading to sharpen our ability to notice, to interpret, to understand language more deeply. Okay, so you start to see patterns, hearing voices and identifying the perspectives, the skills that make you a better communicator, a stronger writer, and of course, a better exam taker. All right. So this is absolutely I quite enjoyed this exercise. I quite enjoyed this exercise. So it's important again, like I said, to always understand the author's tone, the author's bias, and the author's perspective. Okay. And the common IELTS passage types and their tones is usually if you have a scientific report, that means that the tone will most likely be objective or analytical. If it's a personal narrative, then to be reflective and nostalgic. If it's an opinion piece, it will be persuasive and argumentative. And if it's a historical account, then it will be informative and neutral. Okay. Um, it's okay. So there's also a hint. The other thing that is also important to get done is to analyze IELTS expositories for hidden meanings, So when you read an expository passage on media influence and propaganda, you need to be able to identify the author's perspective on media control, the word choices, and the the things that indicate bias, like maybe manipulation versus persuasion, um, any literary device that is used to enforce an argument. And then, of course, number three is that you want to discuss the questions. Does the passage present a balanced view, right? How does the structure of the argument influence the reader? An example would be 1984 by George Orwell. Okay. And this novel is a classic dystopian um, work exploring government control and media influence. So it highlights the power of language in shaping perception. It demonstrates tone, bias, and perspective through the newspeak. That is the government-controlled language. Okay, so when you analyze it, whenever you get to read it, you see that the tone is usually oppressive and foreboding. The bias here, because Orwell basically shows that he has a bias that critiques totalitarian regimes, and then the perspective here is that it's written as a warning against government overreach. Okay. Now, what is the connection to the IELTS again? So many IELTS passages discuss media influence, fake news, and censorship, which is similar to what we have in the book 1984. So recognizing word manipulation in text is key when you want to infer bias in IELTS reading tasks or whatever language, English language test that you're doing. Okay. I would also perhaps want to touch on Animal Farm just again, okay? Because at first glance, when you look at Animal Farm, it might seem like it's a simple story, talking, and I know I kind of like touched on it before, but I just wanted to go further into it for whenever. Is someone saying something? Okay. For whenever someone is eventually gets to read it, or if you've ever read it before. So it's really talking about animals talking on a farm or talking animals on a farm, and a pig becomes their leader. Okay, is there a question here somewhere? Is there a question here somewhere? Oh, right, yes. Okay. Someone is giving insights. Yes, yes, absolutely. Right. So some of the literary devices I found were imagery. It was vivid. Yes, beautiful. Absolutely. The wind whispered. Yes, beautiful. Yes, absolutely. I agree. I agree. I agree. Right. Okay. Beautiful. So as I was saying with regards to Animal Farm, now at first glance, like I said before, it's what animals, talking animals on a farm, a pig becomes the leader. It might even sound like, a children's tale, but don't be fooled. This short novel it's a masterclass in allegory, in satire, in symbolism, because it's bold, it's a bold piece of political literature disguised as a fable. And that's precisely, what makes it so powerful. Because what is Animal Farm really about, right? Orwell wrote about the animal farm in the 1940s during a time of major global political upheaval. And on the surface, it's about a group of animals who overthrow their human farmer in the hopes of creating a fairer, more equal society. But very quickly, things start to fall apart, okay? Power is concentrated in the hooves of a few, particularly the pigs. And eventually, the new leadership becomes just as oppressive as the one they replaced. Now, does that sound familiar? That's exactly what Orwell was trying to pass across. The story is a direct response to the Russian Revolution in 1917 and the rise of the Soviet Union, but Orwell makes it accessible to everyone by using animals and a farm as a metaphor. Okay, so it's very important to think about whenever you're reading anything, how you can relate it to, real life, as it were. Now, if we break it down clearly, the genre for this book is an allegory. That is a story with two layers of meaning, okay? And a satire as well. That is, it's a literary form that uses irony and exaggeration to criticize human behavior. And the key themes in this book are what power and corruption, how those in power often abuse it. You might even have gone there with a pure heart and good intentions, but you get there and it's a different story entirely. So there's also the inequality aspect of it, because even in a society that promises equality, a new elite can emerge. And when that happens, well, story for the gods, okay? And then there's propaganda and control. So the use of language and lies to manipulate others is very prevalent in this book as well. And leadership and betrayal, how leaders can betray the very ideals that they once stood for. And we've seen it happen time and again, even in our dear country. We've seen it happen time and again. Somebody goes there, you voted them in because they've given you some rosy promises, some things that you think that they actually believe in, and then they get there and then the story changes completely. Okay, so what literary devices were used here? There was symbolism, okay? So each character and event represents something in real history, e.g., Napoleon, the pig, actually represents Joseph Stalin, okay? And then, of course, there was irony also, especially the dramatic irony. Oh, sorry, I've not been changing all right. The dramatic irony where the leaders were what was I saying? Okay, so yes, there's irony also in there, and then there's also personification, which means that the writer was giving the animals human traits to explore human nature. Okay, so yeah, basically I think, yeah. So in other words, many of the topics that Orwell explores in narrative form, you will encounter in academic or semi-formal writings on IELTS and other language tests. So what Animal Farm teaches you is to read between the lines, basically. Yes, yes, Richard, we're on the same page. Lovely. Yes, beautiful, beautiful. Um, Yeah, okay, so yeah, it teaches you to read between the lines, and to identify underlying messages, okay, to evaluate tone, bias, and intent. Now, these are key skills. If you want to get a high band on IELTS, this is one of the things that you need to make sure that you know, you're taking into consideration. Um, Okay, I think we can move on from Animal Farm. So let's talk about these literary devices that actually, or other ones that actually also exist in literature. So we have what? Metaphor. What is a metaphor? It's a definition. Sorry, I said it's a different. It's a comparison between two unrelated things without using like or as. Okay. So an example would be Juliet is the sun. This is from the book Romeo and Juliet. And Juliet is warm, bright, and life-giving, is what they're trying to say by saying that Juliet is the sun. Okay. And then time is a thief. Time is a thief. That means that time takes away moments the way a thief steals. So that's an example of a metaphor. Then we have the simile. Now, a direct comparison using like or as. So an example would be her smile was as bright as the morning sun. Now that's, you can see that, so her smile is being um compared to the morning sun. So you're using as or like here. Or, another example would be the river slithered like a serpent through the valley. So here the use of valley was used. Okay. We have personification, that is giving human qualities to non-human things. So an example of that would be love is a smoke raised with fume of sighs. Okay. And another example, and this is from Romeo and Juliet, and another example would be the wind whispered through the trees. Okay. Because basically humans are the ones that whisper, but then you've now given the attribute of a human being to the wind. Okay. And then yeah, so recognizing this, of course, I mean, I believe that I have reiterated this quite a bit on how to recognize these devices in IELTS text, because many IELTS passages contain subtle literary devices. So yeah, basically, I think we're good. I don't think I need to reiterate this again. Okay, so when you get the slides, you can of course also go back and read some of these other passages that I've put in there, and then look at how I've um, analyzed them in my answer. Um, yeah, I already talked about this. Um, I've already talked about, okay, so um, Let me read. So this excerpt here from an IELTS passage says that the dense fog wrapped around the hill like a thick woolen blanket, softening the sharp edges of the landscape. So of course, this is um a simile because it uses word like, okay? And the effect is that it's creating a vivid image of the fog that's covering the land, okay? The power of symbolism, irony, and foreshadowing. Now, these three literary devices enhance storytelling, by adding depth, layers of meaning, and suspense, even in whatever it is that you're reading, not only IELTS passages, but whatever it is that you're reading. When you see things like irony, symbolism, and foreshadowing, then that's what it's actually doing to that particular text. So what symbolism will use an object, a color, or a character to represent a deeper meaning. So example would be the green light in The Great Gatsby represents Gatsby's unattainable dream and the American dream. Okay. Irony would be something okay, it's a contrast between expectations and reality. So the different types of irony. We have the dramatic irony, we have the situational irony, and we have the verbal irony. Now, the dramatic irony is talking about something that the audience knows, something the audience knows and the character doesn't know. Okay, so like we already know this thing about this particular situation, but the person himself, that's the character, the main character doesn't know that, or whatever that thing is describing. So, for instance, Gatsby believes Daisy loves him, but we, the reader, we already know that she won't leave Tom. Okay, so that's the kind of dramatic irony they're talking about. And then the situational irony, that is a surprising reversal of events. That is, a fire station burns down, something that was completely unexpected and all of that, but then it just happens and we're like, oh my God, why? Or maybe like in Game of Thrones, when Ned Stark was killed and we weren't expecting that to happen, that kind of a thing. That's a situational irony. Okay, and then the verbal irony is saying the opposite of what is meant, like, oh great, when something bad happens. That's verbal irony. Okay. And then foreshadowing. This is a clue that hints at future events. So there's an example here of in ice sorry in of Mice and Men. Lenny's accidental killing of animals foreshadows a tragic ending. Okay. Yeah, the class activity here would be for us to, we already did that anyway, but then I'd also want you to go back rather than use it as a class activity, we'll use it as like, some kind of assignments where you go back and read some of these passages that I have in the slides here, and that you can practice and just basically deepen your knowledge with, okay? So yeah, sound devices in literary works. I think we've talked about, okay, we haven't really. Okay, so there's the role of sound, right, in in literature, and sound devices basically create rhythm, they create mood, they create emphasis, and in IELTS passages they can appear in descriptive or poetic texts. So we have something called alliteration. Now, alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words. For example, she sells seashells by the seashore. And some people use this as a tongue twister as well. She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells by the seashore. And then we have assonance. Okay. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds in nearby words. Like the rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain. That's My Fair Lady, Henry Higgins teaching Eliza Doolittle. The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain. And then we have the onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is words that imitate sounds. So the bees buzzed and the teas rustled. So obviously, when you hear a bee, it has this bzzz sound, and that's why they use the word buzzed for it, and that's an onomatopoeia. And then when we identify sound devices, for example, in Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, the alliteration there was silken, sad, and certain rustling. Okay, and then there's assonance there that said, once upon a midnight dreary, I pondered weak and weary. So you can see the rhyming happening there. And then there's something called a marketplace description. So the sizzle of grilled meat filled the air as merchants shouted their daily specials, their voices merging into a rhythmic chant. That's the onomatopoeia there is sizzle, the sound of meat on a grill sounds like and so sizzle. And then we have alliteration, which says merchants shouted their special, okay? Um, Fiction versus non-fiction in writing. We've already talked about it. Fiction uses literary techniques for storytelling, and non-fiction, like passages, may borrow storytelling techniques to engage readers. Okay, analyzing storytelling elements in journalistic IELTS passages. So some news articles and essays sometimes they read like short stories. And then writers also use imagery, dialogue, and suspense to make facts engaging. Okay. Um, why do some non-fiction texts feel like real stories? Well, it's because of the way the facts are presented. They're presented in a linear narrative. And so when that happens, then sometimes you can find that the stories start to feel real. Okay, um, is the tone formal or conversational? Is a question you want to ask yourself, and then are characters conflict and resolutions, are they present? So when that happens, when the tone is conversational and when you have characters and conflicts and resolutions there, it starts to feel like it's a real story. Okay. um yeah, so that's I already answered those questions. um so I mean, basically, um let's just I mean, I want to believe that we've had a rewarding session today. I believe so. I enjoyed myself talking about this because actually it took quite a bit of doing to be able to relate um literary appreciation of literary works to IELTS. And I think we did. Thank you very much for that, Richard. So let's just take a moment to reflect and connect the dots, because everything we've done today builds towards success, basically your success in being able to fully and better understand um um things that you read, being a better thinker, being a better reader, being a better communicator, you know so absolutely. I mean, it's sorry, I'm trying to read what everybody else says. The class is quite. Thank you very much for that, Edith. Thank you very much, Richard. Yes, thank you very much, Edith. It took quite a some doing for me to be able to relate it, but I think I finally found the way to get it done. So we began by defining what literary appreciation is. So not just as something exclusive to bookworms or literature majors, but as a valuable life skill. Okay, so it's about seeing layers beneath the words, and understanding the soul behind the sentences. Then we explored the major genres of literature. If you remember, we talked about fiction, poetry, drama, nonfiction, and we saw how each one opens a different window into human experience. Okay, so whether it's through the rhythm of a sonnet, or the suspense of a short story, every genre offers something powerful. I believe that we're able to bridge the gap between literary tools and IELTS reading passages, and we discovered that, you know, literary skills like identifying tone, spotting figurative language, and interpreting deeper meanings absolutely apply to IELTS. So the exam might be academic, but the techniques are definitely universal. And we talked about George Orwell's Animal Farm and saw how one little book with big ideas can teach us about leadership, propaganda, human behavior, and even the world today. So literature, we saw that, I mean, with this class, was not just about entertainment, but it's about a mirror and a warning and a guide and sometimes a call to action. Okay, so please remember this and always carry it with you. Every text tells a story, whether it's a fable, whether it's science, it's a science report, or reading passage on IELTS. There's always something deeper beneath, the surface. So the more you learn to recognize tone, the more you learn to recognize structure, intention, and emotion in a text, the more confident you'll become. Okay, so you'll be able to then sharpen your critical thinking. Your conversations will become richer, and your love for language might even grow beyond what you expect. Thank you so very much for joining me in this class today. I look forward to our next class where we will be talking about much more with regards to effective communication, English language pronunciation, and elocution. Thank you very much. Any questions, please? Any questions, please? If there are no questions, I think I'll just run back to my other endeavors. Thank you for that, Richard. Thank you very much for that, Richard.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Odejide. It was really, really great. It was the class was really, really insightful. And
Thank you.
yes, ma'am. Like someone asked earlier, the slides will be sent to the Telegram group. I know if you're joining us, if you're just joining, the slides will be sent, and a recording of the class will also be posted on the Telegram group. Um, it was really nice having you all on the call. We hope to see you again next month for this course. Thank you so much.